So a 12-lead EKG records a 10-second rhythm strip. On this strip, the heart's activity is then translated into what we call line tracings. So the dips and the spikes that you see within the EKG cycle are also called waves. And these waves, the P wave, QRS wave, T wave, U wave, they represent different phases of the heart's activity. So let's take a look at some of the activity that we see here. In the P wave, now that P wave is going to be the activity of the SA node. So that represents what's called atrial depolarization or contraction that's happening. Moving on from the P wave, we're going into what's called the QRS wave. And that QRS wave is ventricular activity, and that's actually a depolarization that's happening there. So also contracting depolarization. Moving on from our QRS to our T wave, this is repolarization or the relaxation of the heart. And lastly, which is not always visible, is called the U wave. And the U wave is showing the activity or the repolarization of the bundle of His as well as the Purkinje fibers. We also have what's called intervals. And within these intervals, the PR interval, it starts at the beginning of the P wave, ends at the beginning of the Q wave. The time it takes from the beginning of the atrial depolarization to the beginning of the ventricular depolarization can be measured within what's called the PR interval. Then we have a QT interval, and this is going to show the time it takes from the beginning of a ventricular depolarization to the end of a ventricular repolarization. And lastly, from the S to the T, that's the ST segment, starts at the beginning of the S wave, ends at the beginning of the T wave, and this is the time from ventricular depolarization to the beginning of ventricular repolarization. Overview here of the cardiac cycle. Again, that P wave representing the sinoatrial node's initial impulse, sending out that first impulse of cardiac conductivity, which is causing the atrial contraction or depolarization. Moving on to our QRS, we can see the depolarization and ventricle contraction all the way over here to our T wave now, which is our repolarization and ventricular recovery. So now we've had the contraction of the heart as well as the relaxation, completing one full cardiac cycle, which would then take us to the U wave, which is not always present, but does represent polarization, and the whole cardiac cycle continues over and over again.